This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome. Thank you very much, Dan. Yes, it is the first practice session and the only practice session today because it's a sprint race weekend. We're looking forward to it, but it's a wet and soggy Autodromo Internazionale. Enzo Idino Ferrari and Jack Nicholls standing by to talk us through free practice one. It's going to be pretty tough. It's going to be hectic. But luckily, the rain has eased off from at least earlier this morning.
Yep, absolutely chucking it down this morning for the third round of this World Championship season. It looks dry-ish now in terms of there's no rain coming down. I think it'll still be wet conditions. I think we'll still have wet running in the early stages. But the interesting part is they've kind of got to do some running. Usually in a wet session, it's like, okay, maybe let's not bother. Let's take our time. We'll do some running in FP2. It's going to be drier. But it's qualifying this afternoon, potentially in the same conditions. So they've just got to crack on, really, I'm sure.
I love it when we have a sprint weekend now. I know, Jack, that you're taking some convincing into the actual enjoyment that you take from the overall sprint weekend, but my Fridays of a sprint weekend I think are so much better because you go straight into it. And I often think 3 practice sessions, especially when Fridays used to be an hour and a half long, were a little bit too much.
Well, I'm a 2-day F1 weekend man. That's my vibe. It's practice, qualifying Saturday, race on Sunday. I'm up for that. We did that at Imola 2020, I think, and I liked it. So I take your point. Sprint's interesting, makes it a bit different. New cars this year. Maybe it'll be a thriller. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm not against trying something new, I promise.
Okay, that's always good to know. Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, is also standing by, and plenty of chat, Andrew, ahead of this race, actually about football, unusually, and Lewis Hamilton.
Yes, Lewis Hamilton in the news conference this morning was asked about his involvement in one of the bids to buy Chelsea Football Club, which Roman Abramovich is selling because of the Russia situation. He's in the Sir Martin Broughton-led bid, and he was saying how excited he is about the idea of being part of a football team. He was talking about his childhood, how he always tried to get in. He was in a number of football teams. He even wanted to get a trial for Stevenage Borough, he pointed out. He was talking about those the football sticker books that many of us collected when we were kids. I won't mention the brand name, but I'm sure everybody knows what it is.
Multiple Italian sandwiches.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Delicious.
And he just generally seemed very enthused about the whole idea, which I guess you're going to be if you're going to be putting presumably millions of his own money into it.
I only found out recently that, I'm going to say it now, but I am talking about the sandwiches, that panini is the plural. One is one panino.
Yeah.
It's the same with arancini. Arancini is a plural.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. You can't have one arancini. That's like saying I have one sheep's.
Kudo to you. That's what I say.
Yeah, very good.
We've got some rain, so maybe we'll get into this a little bit more as the session goes along. Who knows? Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to get in touch. Jack, email address if people want to get in touch directly with you via the email of the BBC.
It's it's f1 at bbc.co.uk.
I'm sure people will address them to you anyway. Lovers, haters, whatever they are, you may well get a mention. So slightly kind of grey, drizzly conditions, but that won't stop the running. We'll have an hour on the clock of practice sessions and new power units as well. 2 of them out there. Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, they've changed the power unit as well after his crash in Australia as a precaution. And also a new power unit, the Alpine for Esteban Ocon. It's his second power unit of the season, also as a precaution. We'll find out exactly what went on, hopefully, with those as we go through the session. And just a quick mention for Amit Mandalia, who says, happy birthday to Jack Nicholls. It was your birthday yesterday.
Yep.
Good day?
Lovely day, thanks. But all the better for cars at Imola today.
Your wife will be delighted for that comment, but it is a treat to be back in Italy. Fans in the grandstand as well, and I know the Tifosi, even though there aren't a huge number of them compared to Australia, for example, last time out, have poured into the track at Imola and are desperate to see their car do well, and it could happen this weekend. Just a couple of moments until the green light. I'll let you sync up, Jack.
Yeah, when we get a clock, we'll give you a sync. I think I said it's the 3rd round of the championship earlier on. It's the 4th round, of course, after the 3 races we've had so far. I think it's the 3rd round for me. That's why I'm calling it that.
After
not doing Australia. Yeah, exactly.
Is that how we rule the championship now?
Yeah, exactly. If I don't cover the weekend, then it doesn't count. But we are the session has gone green. The timing has started, and then the cars will be heading out onto the track. I would have thought there are a few people getting ready. George Russell had his helmet on, getting ready to head out. So it's not currently raining. There's no rain falling currently, but the track is wet. The Formula 3 session this morning was red flagged and then abandoned. The Formula 2 session never actually got going and is going to be rescheduled for later on in the weekend. That was the kind of level of rain that we had, and it was a wet race last year as well. You may recall, with Lewis Hamilton making that mistake down at the first corner. If you want to sync up the clock on the top left, we've got 59 minutes and 13, 12, 11, 10 seconds to go. Has a Formula 1 driver, Andrew Benson, bought a football club before?
Not that I'm aware of, Jack. No, I can't.
Or been involved in one or anything like that?
There probably is one, but it's somewhere in the midst of history, but I can't think of it.
No.
We had Chelsea collaborating before, didn't we, with Sauber. That was just a kind of marketing and sponsorship deal, but that was, in 2015, 2016, around that sort of time. So that's the one kind of recent collaboration that I can think of that coincidentally involves Chelsea once again. So obviously there's a strong allegiance between them and Formula 1.
There's also Super League Formula, wasn't there? That series that ran for 3 seasons, where football clubs had their own race cars. The cars were awesome. The racing was quite cool, but the idea was absolutely bizarre.
I've never heard of that before in my life.
Super League Formula?
No, it's totally not on my radar.
Are you joking?
I'm not joking.
Oh, get on the YouTube and have a look at. There was all sorts of. Galatasaray were always very strong. Who were the champions of? Craig Dolby was a driver.
I'm afraid, Jack, that was one of those things that I saw was happening and just paid no attention to whatsoever, because I didn't think it was going to last very long, and I was proved right. None of you watched
Super League Formula?
Someone might have done, but that sounds like a very niche thing for you, Jack, even though obviously it existed, but you've got a lot of time on your hands. We've already established this.
No, but come on, Super League Formula was cool. The champions were... So the champions were 2011 it went for 4 seasons. I know the last season it wasn't football clubs, it went to sort of countries A1GP style, but Davide Rigon was the champion twice, once for Anderlecht and once for Beijing Guan. Liverpool won in 2009 with Adrian Valles driving. Tottenham Hotspur and Craig Dolby were runners-up 2 years in a row. PSV Eindhoven, represented by Jelmer Berman. I think a recent British GT champion, Jelmer Berman.
Didn't capture the public's imagination, did it, somehow?
Did you
Just
not?
Jack.
Did you? Okay, well, in between the sessions, I'll show you some videos, Andrew, because it was really great. The cars were great. A huge accident for Chris van der Drift coming up when he was driving for, I think he was driving for Roma, and he ended up
about Formula 1.
And he ended up in the trees down Pilgrim's Drop. It was huge at Brands Hatch. Have you not seen it? Okay,
No.
Okay. We won't get into Super League Formula though. Well, we already have, but we'll now move along from that. Nobody heading straight out of the track. So, an interesting question here from. I've just lost it here. Dom says, how is the wet likely to affect the porpoising issues we've seen the teams have so far? Valtteri Bottas is out on circuit on the full wet weather tyre, but my sort of guess is, with no aerodynamic knowledge, but porpoising would be less of an issue because you're going slower.
Exactly. It'll depend on the car and at what speed the porpoising starts to happen. So, for example, Ferrari have porpoising, as do Mercedes, but the Mercedes porpoising starts at a lower speed, and that was the problem that they were having in Melbourne, in that they were, as we were explaining on the preview show yesterday actually, Mercedes was still porpoising on the entry to turns 9 and 10 at Albert Park, whereas Ferrari were only porpoising on the straight. So that was a stability issue. So if you're going slower on the straight, it should come in less. But we'll see how that goes. There's no reason why it won't still be there, though, as long as you're reaching that velocity where it starts.
Worth bearing in mind that there was a wet test at the end of Barcelona Friday afternoon, and it was a kind of synthetic wet test because Pirelli went and put a load of water down on track rather than it rained. Ricciardo and Sainz went out on the full wets then, so they got a little bit of experience with the teams for Ferrari and McLaren. And then Hamilton, Perez and Latifi went out on the intermediate tyres slightly later on to get a little bit of experience for them. But in the press conference this morning, a lot of the drivers were saying, look, we just don't know what's going to happen this weekend. We've got no experience with these tyres, no experience of these cars in the wet weather either. So I think there's a huge step into the unknown, which is another reason. I know it's risk versus reward on these sessions, and with qualifying later today, you don't want to bin it, but it's a big... I'm surprised not more cars are out there getting experience.
I guess they only have a certain amount of wet weather tyres for the weekend.
But it's dry for the rest of the weekend, presumably anyway. We've seen the forecast saying there's limited amounts of wet weather expected.
Yeah, that is true. Mick Schumacher actually struggled to get out of his garage there as he pulled out of the pits and turned right. He didn't quite have enough lock on to get out on circuit. But I guess there's still that thing of there's only so much running you want to do. You don't want to just pound around for an hour, I suppose. Kevin says, can't think of any drivers, but Bernie Eccleston and Flavio Briatore owned QPR once.
Indeed, they did.
Along
yes.
with Alejandro Agag, who then went on to start Formula E.
And of course, there's a close link in some ways, between Ferrari and Fiat and Juventus. It's all part of the same Agnelli empire. And people may remember Maurizio Arrivabene, the previous Ferrari team principal. He's now, I think it's the general manager or something like that of Juventus.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. Lauren says on the emails, f1@bbc.co.uk, could I get a shout out for Sloths, Oats and Porridge, who are fittingly fans of the slower teams, Aston Martin and Williams? There you go. I don't really know what that meant, but it happened. You send me an email, it gets read out. It's like Anchorman. So Bottas out on track, Schumacher, Magnussen, Gasly, Tsunoda, Sainz now leaving the pit lane. They're all on the full wet weather tyres. Bottas has done a 1:43.2 as the first notable lap time of the session. And what do you do when you go out on track now as well? Do you go to sort of start low fuel runs? Do you go high fuel runs? What are you trying to achieve in this session, I suppose?
Well, the compromise that they've got is that qualifying may be wet or it may be dry. They don't know. But as Jenny says, the forecast is for the dry Saturday, but rain 40% chance on Sunday. So in the past, there was no such thing as a wet setup on a Formula One car. People would ask that question all the time and assume that there might be. As we see Charles Leclerc have a sort of a rear end wobble as he climbs out of Tosa in the Ferrari. But they didn't really change anything. They might add a little bit of wing, but I think the cars were basically the same from wet to dry, because obviously you know, if you change to a wet setup, you lose a lot more time in the dry than if you change to a dry setup than you lose in the wet. What we don't know is how the teams are going to approach wet weather now with these new ground effect cars, but I would imagine it'll be pretty much the same thing. But they're still going to be making judgments as to how to prepare for the whole weekend, which is more compressed this weekend, because of the sprint event that's happening at Imola this time round.
Charles Leclerc has had a spin coming out of the Variante Alta at the top of the hill, and he had a bit of a moment down at Tosa, was struggling to get the car turned through the hairpin left-hander, and then has had presumably a spin on the throttle coming out of Variante Alta.
Leclerc was saying, actually, Jack, yesterday and today, that the wet is one of the weaker areas that Ferrari have had in the last couple of years, and that it was something that he was hoping would not be the case anymore with this year's car, but it's looking a bit tricky at the moment.
Do you know what, when I was thinking back to the fact that this session was going to be wet, I was thinking of Leclerc's performances in the wet, and I couldn't think of anywhere he's been outstanding, actually. I thought, well, maybe this is a little weak spot for him, and one certainly this weekend that Verstappen's going to have to make the most of because of those two DNFs so far. We know Verstappen goes well in the wet, and the race could be totally dry, but today they've got to try and make the most of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the course of the session. Magnussen has gone quickest now, 1 minute 42. There's someone in the gravel. It's Latifi in the Williams. So if any of you had him down in your sweepstake as the first chap in the gravel, then you've won this one. He recovers onto the track now. Hasn't done any damage to the car by the looks of things. Has just sort of skidded off in a similar manner to Hamilton last year. Great email here from Morris. He says, "Oh God, we got you back this week. After 3 wonderful races, we get to listen to your drivel again." I did the first 2, Morris. Like, you had my drivel for the first 2. It's only the last one, but there we go.
I think it's great that you're back, Jack. When are you off again?
yeah, exactly. Here's Latifi's radio.
The car just keeps going into anti-stall. So it's strange.
Okay, Latifi saying the car kept going into anti-stall. It was strange. He did go quite slowly when he rejoined the circuit. Bottas now goes quickest, a 1 minute 40.2, quicker, 2.3 seconds quicker than Kevin Magnussen. But the lap times are just going to drop and drop really over the course of this session. Latifi locked the fronts coming into Tosa, and then his right side wheels went on the grass, and that kept him skidding straight on into the gravel.
Still quite a lot of standing water around. Visibility is not great out there. I just wouldn't want to be following someone around at the moment in those conditions. I mean, obviously the water will disperse the more cars go round there, but it's not great at the moment to be behind someone.
No, and Alex Albon has just locked up and gone straight on at the Variante Alta, and Leclerc's spin was because he really was all over the curbs on the way in and the way out of the chicane, and that just lifted the rear of the car up, bounced him down and spun him around. So it wasn't on throttle as I thought it may have been, but he has now got going again. Verstappen goes fastest, a 1 minute 39.595. Only Ricciardo and Vettel are yet to leave the pit lane at the moment.
Well, Vettel's done plenty of running so far this season. I don't think he needs to go out. It's all fine. Aston Martin had an absolute horror last time out. And I think Vettel was trying to be very buoyant in the press conferences today, saying it'll be fine. You know, that we're still pretty happy within the team ourselves. We haven't let our heads go down, but you have to ask questions, don't you, of what will Vettel do longer term? Will he stay? Will he go? What's the form going to be like? Can they improve? They've got lots of bits to throw on that Aston Martin, but not yet.
Yellow flag in sector 2 now. Vettel's still in the pits. Ricciardo still in the pits, as I say. Latifi has returned to the pits in the Williams. And I've just had an email from Karun Chandok saying, "I just heard if I send you an email, it would be read out. So I want to know how many pizzas Jack has had this weekend." And I did have a lovely pizza at the top of on the run down to Ravazza. There's a restaurant on the left-hand side. Absolutely wonderful pizza there. Really, really top quality. Hamilton has had a big slide coming out of the Variante Auto. Oh, Karun also says that Morris is his alter ego. So thanks for that one. But at least we know what Karun listens to when he's not working. Take from that what you will.
What flavour pizza was it, Jack?
It was like a meat one, a bit of guanciale. It was lovely. Carlos Sainz has been straight across the Variante Alta as well at the top of the hill, the tricky left-right chicane where we see a lot of crashes in the past. A very slow speed corner, right-left chicane. My apologies. I remember Jos Verstappen, I think, had a big one there in a Minardi back in the early 2000s. Verstappen is quickest though, 37.2, a 1 minute 37.247. He's just improved again to go 1.8 seconds clear of Pierre Gasly, 1.9 seconds clear of Charles Leclerc. Tsunoda slots into 4th place, Magnussen 5th, Bottas, Perez, Alonso, Norris and Ocon the rest of the top 10. And Bottas has now jumped up into 2nd position. So lap times, Jenny, just falling all the time, really.
Yeah, as you'd expect under these conditions, still pretty hard visibility, even for us to be able to see the cars at times. It's pretty tough visibility out there. Bottas, remember, got that pole back in 2020, but then got debris and floor damage, so finished 2nd. He's got good form around here, but what can he do when he's changed team in this Alfa Romeo, and how will that be affected by the wet weather. I mean, we'll wait and see what happens in qualifying later today, but here's one driver who's hoping that the weather kind of helps him and shuffles the cars around so he can do well when it comes to the race.
Well, Jenny, don't discredit Alfa Romeo. I was doing some numbers in the week. I've got this spreadsheet that I enter the sort of fastest lap times of each weekend in for each team. Alfa Romeo are actually the 4th fastest team so far this year. I think Alpine would probably have snuck ahead of them if Fernando Alonso had been able to complete his Australia qualifying. But they've made a big step forward this year, and they're sort of very much at the head of the sort of the midfield pack behind Mercedes, who are obviously a long way behind Ferrari and Red Bull.
Yeah, when I think it was George Russell speaking earlier today, and he kind of collaborated your information. He was saying that they are 0.7 to a second behind on pace from where they want to be with Red Bull and Ferrari. That's a huge gap to make, and they have no new parts this weekend. Ferrari, no new parts this weekend. Red Bull, a couple of bits and pieces here and there, but this is definitely going to be a development war going forward of who can keep up with each other. What can Mercedes find in the bag when they finally bring a decent update?
Yeah, Mercedes do actually have a small update, Jenny, this weekend. They've got a modified floor. It's only a small area of the floor. They're trying to stop some airflow separation that's happening in the diffuser. Now that's interesting because airflow separation will mean a loss of downforce, which could be something that may be related to the whole porpoising problem. We'll have to see. It's not a major update. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell were both saying that they didn't think there were going to there wasn't anything on the car that was going to add up to a substantial improvement. But they are beginning to make some small changes, and there's another a couple of modifications in the rear corner area, again about increasing downforce in the diffuser, and some things around the airflow, improving the airflow into the side pods.
Sebastian Vettel wrestling his Aston Martin around the lap. That's the sound you're hearing, and nearly went into the gravel coming into the first Rivazza. Gets on the power now and out across the line, and Vettel's first lap is a 1 minute 43.8, 6.5 seconds off Verstappen. Verstappen's improving again. Perez is second fastest at the moment, 4/10 back from Max Verstappen, but Verstappen just chips away, well, only a fraction more time actually, still at 1 minute 36.158. And 4/10 ahead of Perez, half a second ahead of Leclerc. Magnussen still lurking there in 4th position, he's 7/10 back. Gasly is 5th, and then it is Bottas, Sainz, Alonso, Schumacher and Norris, the top 10. Tsunoda, Russell, Hamilton, Ocon, Stroll, the top 15. Zhou, Albon, Vettel and Latifi. Vettel, the last driver to have set the lap time. Latifi back in the pits, so maybe some kind of problem for Latifi. He said that the car kept going into anti-stall, so that seems to be a bit of a problem for him at the moment. Ricciardo is on his first lap. Sainz has just gone second. Tsunoda has just gone third. Verstappen actually improved by a huge chunk of time. I thought he only fractionally improved, but it was actually the timing screen's not updating in time, so it's 1.5 seconds now, his advantage over the others. 42 minutes on the clock.
Ricciardo had issues with his headrest, I believe. That's why he's slightly late out in the McLaren, but he's going round now trying to set his decent time, just coming through just in sector 2 at the moment, so he'll be looking to improve. It's green at the moment for him. He's done all right around here in the past, hasn't he? Podium before.
Yep, absolutely.
Different colour car though. Yellow.
Yeah.
That's when he got Hamilton to do a shoey, and they talked about toe jam. Fun times.
I don't.
You want to go there?
I don't really recall, to be honest.
Erased it from your memory.
The toe jam stuff, yeah. Ricciardo onto the brakes into the first Rivazza, the first of the 2 left-handers at the bottom of the hill, the final 2 corners on the lap, and then eventually getting on the power and coming over the line. Pierre Gasly now goes 3rd quickest in what is relatively a home race for AlphaTauri, just 20 minutes north in Faenza, or south. Are they north or south Faenza? I can't remember. But very close nevertheless. And Gasly 3rd, Tsunoda 4th, Perez 5th.
Just been there.
Yeah, I know. I literally went to Faenza like 3 weeks ago. So I think you go past Imola to get to Faenza, so I think it's south. I'm going with it. Here's Norris's radio.
And Lando, how is the damage on the tyre? If we're doing too much damage, we might consider coming in.
Yeah, I'm happy at the minute, so I'm happy to box just to check what the tyres are like.
So that's Norris saying he's happy to pit to check what the tyres are like. Actually, as we were hearing that radio, he went skidding through the gravel at Ravazza and rejoined the circuit. All the drivers are out on the full wet tyre, and it visibly looks like it's kind of intermediate ready, to be perfectly honest. And yes, Faenza is south of Imola, well, southeast, let's call it. Yeah, they don't want to, that's what we were talking about earlier, Jenny. They don't want to do too much damage to these tyres, especially the wet tyres, if the track's drying.
Yeah, you kind of got to nurse them, haven't you, through these Pirelli tyres, these new wet constructions. We've got to see how well they do, but clearly Norris was saying I'm kind of happy enough, but there was a certain lack of confidence, and as we just watch him again, just skidding out, going wide onto the gravel, as you say, at Ravazza, and then trying to get the car back on track and going very slowly, as I think it was Magnussen in the Haas was just coming round as well. So, I don't think he was having that much fun on those tyres by the end of that lap, and there's certainly a lot of people out there just losing the rear end a little bit. We've just seen Sainz in the Ferrari doing the same, and he's setting a decent lap time, though.
Coming around the final corner, set the fastest first sector of anyone, very twitchy through the second Ravazza. Leclerc is currently the fastest driver out there. Sainz has just slotted into second place, 1/10 slower than his teammate Leclerc, and Leclerc lost a bit of time through the last two sectors. Actually, he was looking like going to improve his time, but then he dropped away a little bit. But they've done, some of these drivers now, 10 laps, 9 laps for the Ferraris on these wet tyres.
Just wonder if this is the weekend Sainz outperforms Leclerc. It would be a surprise, I think, for everybody, but certainly today in wet conditions or wetter conditions, having just signed a new deal to keep him with Ferrari for a couple more years, I think it's a good time for him to put in a decent performance. You often see it, don't you, after a new contract signing has been announced, that a driver suddenly performs.
How far is from Inters?
Not far, very intermediate.
Okay. Tyres, Andrew. If they're saying the track's not quite ready for Inters, that's interesting, because we've seen a lot over the last years that you never use the full wet tyre because it doesn't really work that well, and you want to get the intermediates on straight away.
Yeah, they definitely want the Inters on as soon as they can. Oh, we've got Leclerc spinning again.
Yeah, that's at Acqua Minerale on the exit of the second part of the right-hander as he gets back on his way. They want the Inters on as soon as possible, at least historically with Pirellis, because the intermediate is a decent tyre, whereas the drivers all say the full wet basically is pretty useless. But that as it may, when there's so much water, you need the sort of water evacuation of the full wet. Sometimes if there's too much water on the track, the Inter, although it's a better tyre generally, just can't cope with the level of water, and that's what Sainz is talking about here. It's been raining. It rained all night really heavily. The car parks are pretty much a quagmire at Imola this morning, and Leclerc just got a bit wide onto the exit curb at Acqua Minerale there and spun round. That's 2 or 3 spins he's had in between, looking very, very quick. So I think his worries about the pace of the Ferrari in the West seem to have been sort of eased a little, although he's finding it a bit difficult to hang on to it. But what we don't know, of course, Jack, is what the wet tyres are going to be like now. We see Esteban Ocon going wide. Is that Ravazza, I think? We don't know how the new Pirelli tyres are going to be in terms of the wet now that they've gone to 18-inch wheels. The drivers are just literally discovering that right now.
I think Leclerc is still quite spinny on a Friday. That's just, I watch him, I see him go to the limits, go beyond the limits, he spins, he comes onto gravel. He does that on a Friday, and I feel like that's part of what he needs to do as a driver to set himself up for the weekend in a way.
I know what you mean, and it's actually interesting because after the race in Australia, he was talking. I asked him actually about his mindset this year, and he said he was finding he didn't have to push right out to the limit in the way that he has done in the previous years, because he wasn't trying to sort of overachieve in a car that wasn't capable. He was saying he had the confidence that the car could do it. So he's not been making so those sort of errors that we might have seen from him from time to time in the past haven't happened so far this year. But you are right, Jenny, he has made some errors in Friday practice this year. It's almost like he's kind of going over the limit to find the limit, if you like, and maybe he's finding that's an effective way of shortcutting things, which is interesting. And this is just a sort of slight tangent. He drove Gilles Villeneuve's 1979 312 T4 Jack at Fiorano earlier this week.
Really?
For what I assume, Ferrari are being a bit coy about what it was all about, but I assume it's for a 40th anniversary celebration of or remembrance of Villeneuve's death in 1982. Next month. But that's what Villeneuve used to do. He was famous for sort of finding the limit by going over it, but not so much that he ever did any major damage. And that's not the first time people have related Leclerc and Gilles Villeneuve as similar character of drivers, you know, in terms of aggression, lots of speed.
Not a bad person to be linked to.
No, exactly. I know that Leclerc would be very flattered by that if he heard it, because although he's not a great history student, he does appreciate the legends of Ferrari's past, as he described Villeneuve this morning.
Perez has done a pretty good time. He's just gone to the top of the leaderboard. Looked very comfortable in some of the sectors when he was out there. So Red Bull at the top, and then it's the Ferrari of Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Gasly and Magnussen making up the top 6.
There are drivers actually who have said to me in the past that, yeah, you see me off a lot in practice sessions because I am going beyond the limit, especially at tracks with runoff and that sort of thing. And that's part of the reason I dislike runoff areas, because to me the talent is going up to the limit. It's easier to find the limit once you go over it. Conceptually speaking.
Well, it's a philosophical approach by different drivers. Michael Schumacher used to do it too. You often used to see the camera would cut in Michael Schumacher's career to him sort of navigating around the outside of the gravel of a runoff area on the grassy bit or a bit of tarmac that he'd found, and he was actually trying it out so that if anything went wrong in the race, he would know where to go.
Kimi Räikkönen Brazil gate style.
Slightly different, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, they're all different. I remember I was researching an article on Fernando Alonso a few years ago, and I spoke to Andrea Stella, the McLaren performance director, who's worked with both Schumacher and Alonso, and he compared them. He said Schumacher was a guy who would go over the limit to find the limit and then come back to it, whereas Alonso was someone who would work up to the limit and then stay there. I think it's just a different way that different drivers approach their craft. And Schumacher and Alonso, two drivers very much at the very, very highest echelon of Grand Prix drivers ever. And yet even they're doing things differently.
Yeah. Hamilton wasn't like that though, was he? Arguably.
Hamilton seems to be one of those guys who just gets to the limit immediately, and that's where it is.
Depressing for everybody else to watch.
33 minutes to go. Scott says, I went to Imola in 2000 and ordered a pizza in Bologna. Thinking I was an expert in pizzas due to frequent visits to Pizza Hut, I confidently ordered a deep pan ham and pineapple. The waiter looked at me as if I'd deeply insulted his mother. So that sounds like a great trip there, Scott. Across the line comes Sebastian Vettel, 15th quickest as he comes through. Perez still quickest, as Jenny said. Leclerc second, Sainz third, Verstappen fourth, Gasly fifth. Nicholas Latifi is about to head back out on track. Is this something I haven't noticed with the Williams? It doesn't really look finished and stickered, does it?
I can tell you about that,
okay.
If you like.
Yes, please.
A lot of the cars are now taking off some of their paintwork and bodywork to try and lighten the load of the car. So we've seen quite a few of the cars are overweight, and if you can bring the weight of the car down, then obviously it will go faster. Now, if you take away the paint of the car, it's worth around 0.5 kilogram. So a lot of the cars up and down the pit lane that I've seen today have a lot less of the shiny sort of paint job that you had at the beginning in the launch phase than you have now. And they're doing it to try and make the car more efficient and weigh less. It's incredible. One of the biggest ones, if you look at the McLaren when you get the chance, it's less orange now by a long shot than it was before. So the cars are all going to kind of assimilate by being basically a lot blacker than they were when they started.
Yeah, it's just a lot of the Williams is just carbon fibre looking, basically.
I like it.
Not if they all do it.
Well, it's going to make your job a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly. Alex Albon is the sound you can hear. He is out. Vettel's gone out on intermediates and just gone 5th fastest in the Aston Martin. Stroll is on intermediates as well. As I say, you're hearing Alex Albon, who is on the wet tyre. He's 1.6 seconds down on Perez in the first sector as he gets on the power now and climbs the hill. Half a kilo is quite a lot.
It's substantial enough that they're doing it.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind they still have huge marketing deals and budgets with sponsors who pay for space on the car, and you can't put space on a car that's carbon fibre, then it is a sacrifice. And I wonder exactly what how it's playing out in the boardrooms. But the cars need to go faster. That's the sacrifice you have to take.
Good gag here from Richard. He says, I thought Porpoising would like the wet. Fair point.
You said good gag.
I like that. Yeah, I'm here for those kind of gags.
Alex Albon looking decent in that Williams at the moment, and he certainly had a good result last time out in Australia. And he said that the car could run on those hard tyres, which was the C2 nomination last time out. Well, I can tell you, it's the C2 again this weekend. Now, people might be wise to the strategy of what they're trying to do, because last time out they kept going until the last lap of the race, then came in, changed over tyres, and gave him a one-lap wonder to go and get 10th place in the first point for them. An important point as he rounds out through Ravazza towards the end of his lap. But I wonder if they'll do the same again this weekend.
Well, I presume it was a circumstantial strategy, right? It wasn't in the briefing before the race. They said we're just going to run till the very last lap. I presume it all kind of came together for that to work out and to happen on the fly.
They wouldn't have had the knowledge that said the tyre could have got them right through to the end, but they certainly had the knowledge with them that the tyre would last and be stable for long enough to try it. So yes, they didn't get all the data, and as you say, it was a little circumstantial, but on the whole, it was an option that they had.
Wow, it's remarkable. Less than 29 minutes to go. If you need a little sync, 28 minutes and 38 seconds on the clock. George Russell, who's had some eventful races the last 2 times in Imola. Obviously the crash with Valtteri Bottas last year when Russell was in the Williams and Bottas in the Mercedes, that was Russell's fault. And then the year before that, as he goes wide over the jagged curbs on the exit of the second part of Acqua Minerale. But the year before that, he was looking set for some points, wasn't he? 1 point or some points behind the safety car, and he spun behind the safety car and into the barriers. So
that was heartbreak.
A couple of eventful races for Russell.
He really needs to finish this one, doesn't he? And he's in a Mercedes now, and at race weekends where they're mixed up, at a sprint weekend where they can gain places back in the race, and it's not just about pure pace, you've got to think that they could be there or thereabouts this weekend.
Just getting a replay of Russell's moment at the second right-hander at Acqua Minerale. He just had 2 wheels on the curb on the left-hand side as he tried to turn into the second part of the corner. Lance Stroll has also had a moment at Acqua Minerale, and he's gone wide on the exit, bounced over the blue signage painted on the exit of the corner. Perez still fastest, no one improving at the moment since Sebastian Vettel went 4th quickest.
Yeah, Stroll on those green intermediate tyres in the Aston Martin. Other drivers out there on intermediates. Norris has now made the switch onto those, and Vettel is in the pits, but he went out there and tried it on intermediates as well. So let's see what Norris can do now he's on the intermediates.
Paul says that Tazio Nuvolari once said, "One cannot find the limit without first exceeding it." Supposedly, the diminutive Italian who was a phenomenal racing driver pre-war, and bikes as well, wasn't he? I think he was incredible on motorbikes, and then they said, "Oh, you should try cars," and then he was incredible in cars as well. Murray Walker's shout for best ever racing driver, I think.
I think he's for the cognoscenti, if we're using Italian words on this Italian weekend, he's right up there for a lot of people. Tazio Nuvolari, yeah.
Is cognoscenti Italian for connoisseur?
Effectively, yeah.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Interestingly, this weekend, one person is making the switch across from bikes to cars, and it's Jorge Lorenzo, former MotoGP world champion. Well, he's still a world champion, just not this year. He's made the switch across, and he's actually in Imola racing this weekend, which is kind of cool.
And when I was in Imola a couple of weeks ago, Valentino Rossi was racing GT cars. He's racing in the GT World Challenge Europe as well. So there we go. Rossi or Nuvolari. Take your pick. 26 minutes left on the clock.
I think we might have to see how not how Nuvolari's career goes, but how Rossi's four-wheel antics.
Yeah, I don't think it'll match Nuvolari's.
You think?
No, I don't think so. Norris is coming through on a set of intermediates now. He's coming down to Tosa. He's 1.1 seconds down on Perez after the first sector and isn't improving on his own personal best time. The rain and track and water levels all seem about similar at the moment. Doesn't seem to be getting noticeably better.
But Jack, have you noticed that some of the drivers, for example Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, still on the wet tyre and some on the intermediates? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that we've got people splitting their tactics when they're going for a decent lap time and they don't know quite which tyre will be better.
Yeah, I'll have a look as to whether those are new wet tyres that Bottas has gone out, and I presume that he's going to be on the same ones with 25 minutes on the clock. Norris has backed off on this lap. The majority of drivers are still in the pits. Stroll in 8th is on track. Bottas in 10th is on track. Russell, Norris, and then the two Williams, Albon and Latifi. They are the only drivers on circuit. Albon jumps up to 15th place. Most of the drivers still in the pit lane. Andrew Benson.
I would suggest, just to pick up on Jenny's point there, that if Sebastian Vettel can be 4th quickest in an Aston Martin, which is the slowest car on the grid this year, on Inters, then the Inter is the fastest tyre at the moment. And it's just the fact that most of the drivers, as Jack said, are in the pits, who've done their fastest times on the wet tyre, the full wet, or extreme as it's officially called. That's just a function of the fact that they went out earlier and they've got quicker cars and on a slower tyre.
I think that is it was the same wet tyre for Bottas, but he just came back in, so some kind of install run for Valtteri Bottas halfway through the session.
Russell's on the full wet as well, but again he used full wet.
Yeah, so out on circuit goes Sebastian Vettel now in the Aston Martin on the intermediate tyres in that 4th place, as Andrew said. Russell, Norris and Albon are all on track, improving with 23.5 minutes to go.
It's strange to think, isn't it? This is the last bit of running that we'll get, this last 23 minutes until qualifying. I still can't get my head around it slightly. I wonder how at ease the drivers are about it. Remember, 3 sprint races this year. Austria, Brazil, format slightly different. 8 points up for grabs for the winner of the sprint race. Obviously, the 8th person getting 1 point. You've got a point as well still for fastest lap. So a maximum of 34 points this weekend. So it's pretty chunky, isn't it, with regards to the championship? That's exactly how far it is between Russell and Leclerc.
Yeah, absolutely. Stroll now coming through the Villeneuve, through the Tamburello chicane, the first corner on the circuit, and he has gone straight on at the first Ravazza. So another driver to take a little trip through the gravel. Very tricky braking into the first Ravazza because you're coming through a right-hander down the hill, braking, turning left. And it's just got away from Stroll. Lando Norris has just gone second fastest, a 1 minute 35.502 as he comes across the line. So the McLaren on the intermediates goes up into second spot.
Which I think underlines my point about the Inter, it being definitely Inter conditions now.
I'll concede. I'll give you that.
Cody says, how do drivers deal with getting soaked in wet conditions with an open cockpit? It sounds miserable to be rained on for 2 hours while trying to focus. And do they have special overalls for different conditions? I think they just get wet.
They get wet, but not as wet as you would think, because if you think about what the car's doing, the rain, and also how the rain's falling, the rain mostly goes over the cockpit.
It's when you're waiting on the grid,
and
those kind of times that you get wet.
And they have umbrellas for that, and little marquees now as well, after, was it Malaysia 1 year, where we all got absolutely drenched on the grid. Worth noting, they also have new overalls for each session, they do. Unlike us in the pit lane.
And overalls are expensive.
The bikes they wear in motorbike racing, they wear these little waterproofs over their leathers, which I found a bit bizarre, which I'd not seen before. I didn't really realise. But I was watching
they get
practice.
Very slippy.
What, the leather gets slippy?
Yeah, well, if you think about what it's made from, it's a very different component to what a race suit for F1 is made from, so it can get very slippy.
Oh.
And they have to be special because the Dainese browns, anyway, they actually expand if you crash to protect the driver. It's incredible technology.
Yeah.
So, they have to have expandable plastic that goes on the outside as well.
A long way into the gravel trap is Kevin Magnussen. I think that's at Ravazza 1, so he has gone sailing in there and bounced his way through the gravel trap and back onto the circuit. And
bouncing like a Mercedes at the end of a straight.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? As Magnussen resumes and rejoins the track, and I think he may have just done the classic first Ravazza onto the brakes. All seems to be going okay, but then, just not enough stopping power, and he skips straight on.
Carlos Sainz setting a fast time out there in the Ferrari. He takes the lead with a 1:33.716.
And he is 1.7 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. So that's a quick lap from Sainz.
And we've got an answer on the porpoising from earlier. The Ferrari is porpoising.
Yeah,
there's no question about that, but going quickly at the same time.
It's amazing that the porpoising for the Ferrari doesn't seem to affect them, where porpoising for the Mercedes really does affect them. It's such a different, a headache, almost literally, for the two teams.
Sainz is now 4 tenths up on his own previous best lap. So in the first sector alone, so through the 2 chicanes, he's already found 4 tenths. He's now coming up to Piratella at the on his way down the hill now towards Aquaminarali, the double right-hander, lowest point on the circuit. Swings it through those 2 rights and then starts the climb up to the Variante Alta. Less than 20 minutes to go. Sainz through the middle sector, and he's now 6 tenths up on his previous best. So he is finding some time here, really aggressive on the curbs through the Variante Alta. A little bit of a slide on the exit, which wasn't the cleanest, and now drops down the hill once more, the other side to the 2 Ravazza corners. Gets it stopped where Magnussen and many others didn't, and then the final left-hander out onto the start-finish straight. He's up behind Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin as he comes through, and Sainz does a 1:32.6, so he finds another 1.1 seconds on his previous best time.
Gosh, he looked really impressive out there, didn't he? I just wonder if this could be his weekend. I know I said it before, but I mean, the Tifosi would love it. They've taken Carlos Sainz really to their hearts. I think there are due to be about 90,000 people here this weekend at Imola to watch, and it's such a difference when you have the Tifosi at a track. And they've definitely warmed to Sainz. They'll be buoyed by the fact that he's staying there. Consistency in the team. Leclerc was talking about it as well. They have a long-term vision now. Sainz has struggled, hasn't he, so far?
Yeah, and Leclerc has had a spin, a nice sort of half spin, let's say. He got on the curb, just on that kink, which isn't really a corner, but coming through the left-hander between the Tamburello chicane and the Villeneuve chicane, hit the curb, big sideways moment, slid sideways, corrected it, and then drove on a straight line again. So big moment that for Charles Leclerc. He's on another lap now and improving through the middle sector. Hamilton is improving. He's currently down in 18th place, Lewis Hamilton, 6 seconds off the pace. He is finding some time here, but he's almost a second off in Sector 1 and over a second off in Sector 2. In fact, I think he's 2 seconds off in Sector 2. Hamilton across the line, and he is 4.5 seconds slower than Sainz. Now, he is on the full wet tyre, Lewis Hamilton. Charles Leclerc does now go fastest, a 1:32.512, 1 tenth quicker than Sainz. Perez still in the pits, Norris still in the pits, Stroll still in the pits. Verstappen is out on track. He's coming through the first sector now on a set of intermediate tyres, through the left-hander at Tosa, and then on the power up the hill towards Piratella. Leclerc quickest, Sainz second, Vettel third, Perez fourth, Norris fifth, Stroll, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Gasly, Magnussen, the top 10. But those are all going to shuffle around a little now, I think, as Verstappen comes through the double right-hander of Aquaminarali, down at the bottom of the hill, and then starts the climb up to Variante Alta. We will see. Oh, he's got a bit wide on the exit curb coming through the right. Might have cost him a bit of time, and he's half a second down on Charles Leclerc after the first 2 sectors.
Sainz is putting in another fast lap as well as he goes round again, as is the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. So they just seem to be going round and round in circles in these intermediate tyres, setting faster and faster laps.
Leclerc 2 tenths up after the middle sector. Verstappen nice and steady through the first Ravazza, then on the power out of the second Ravazza and across the line. And what's he going to do compared to Charles Leclerc? He is 1.3 seconds slower. He slots into third place, but 1.3 seconds slower. Did have that mistake. Sainz has been off the track at the end of the middle sector, so I presume that's on the exit of Acqua Minerale that Sainz has had a moment. So he's now starting to fire up another lap, and in fact the same is true of Leclerc. In fact, I wonder if Leclerc got yellow flagged by Sainz as they come across the line down towards turn 1 again at Tamburello. There's a yellow flag in the third sector now, so lots of drivers struggling a little with the conditions out there, as you well might expect. It was Mick Schumacher that had a spin in the final sector. So lap time's coming down. The Ferraris are going to go for it again, Jenny.
Yeah, they certainly are revving up. They're in the first sector at the moment, still setting some mini sectors in purple, which means they're going faster than anybody else has been out there before. And Leclerc and Sainz just pushing each other on, aren't they? Making each other go faster and faster. It's fascinating to watch them. And Verstappen, once again, maybe on a cool-down lap before he goes for it again, but he's not setting any purple sectors.
Yeah, I think he has backed off in this middle sector. His first sector was decent, Max Verstappen, but by decent, it was half a second slower than Sainz, but he has now backed off in the middle. And Leclerc now is coming up the hill in the Ferrari up towards Variante Alta. 1.2 seconds up on his previous best, but he doesn't go around the chicane. Skips straight over, and that is another lap not in the books for Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz behind him is going quickly though, so we'll keep an eye on his time. He looks to have made it through the chicane absolutely okay. He's about to come into view over the crest of the hill from the gloom. Quite a few wet races in Imola over the years. There was one race, Benson will tell me the year, but Alain Prost and Gerhard Berger both went off on the formation lap.
1991.
Thank you.
Actually, Alain Prost was out.
Yeah,
in that. I think
stalled the car.
Going,
Berger kind of spun across the grass. 1991. Sainz goes 1.7 seconds quicker than Leclerc, but Leclerc was up on his lap anyway. The Ferraris they're in a class of their own at the moment, but they're also the only team that have really done a lot of running on the intermediate at this point in the session, Andrew.
Yes, although Verstappen has done a couple of interlaps, hasn't he? He's looking quite quick on this lap now. He's not on target to beat Sainz right now, as he's in the middle of the middle sector, but he has done a couple of purple, that's fastest of all, mini sectors. So I'm going to be interested to see exactly where he shapes up at the end of this lap. But you are right, Kevin Magnussen's gone third, by the way, in the Haas. But you are right, the Ferrari looks super quick in the wet conditions at the moment.
But Vettel's lap time from about 15 minutes ago is still holding up in fifth place. So
yeah, but he's 4 seconds off Sainz.
Agreed, but my point is we're not actually seeing any other quick laps coming in yet on the intermediates, Jen.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton still was trolling around on the wet tyre, so I wonder if that's just a strategy. They're just saving that intermediate until the conditions are absolutely at their best. Russell has just gone onto the intermediate, and I tell you what, that Haas of Kevin Magnussen doing a nice job. Max Verstappen slots it into second place now, 1.3 seconds behind Carlos Sainz. Can Magnussen now, as he crosses the line, go any further up? No, it looks like he's slotted into third place, so it's Sainz in P1, Verstappen 2, and Magnussen in 3, with Leclerc in fourth place.
Magnussen coming through the first chicane. Leclerc across the line improves. He's still 1.2 seconds back from Carlos Sainz though, and it was slower than his previous lap was going to be. Vettel has had a bit of oversteer on entry coming into the Variante Alta, which he corrects and then goes through the grass runoff area and cuts the corner.
There has been quite a lot of chat about this Haas and how closely linked to a Ferrari it is. And I don't, the rules are the rules, and they seem to say that they're following them. There's been no official word from the FIA saying they're looking into it or they're investigating what's going on between Haas and Ferrari. But the Haas is performing so much better this season, and you just look at where they are, P4 at the moment, with Magnussen, Schumacher in P6. Some people would say it's a joy to see, others not so impressed by it.
Thoughts, Andrew?
Well, the Haas is quite quick, but it's not as quick as everyone thinks it is. So they're, I think they're sort of 7th or 8th quickest car over the season so far. Although they have scored some points. Magnussen had a really good debut, return, I should say, in Bahrain at the start of the year. The controversy that people have over the Haas is that the close links with Haas and Ferrari are that they have Ferrari engineers on secondment to Haas doing their design work for them. They do that at Ferrari. They use the Ferrari wind tunnel. And then the car is built by Dallara, which is an Italian race car constructor. There are supposed to be Chinese walls between Haas and Ferrari so that no intellectual property transfers from one to the other. And the FIA say that they're happy that that's the case. But of course, Formula 1 being what it is, the rest of the teams have suspicions about whether that's really true. Haas, of course, would say it absolutely is. And there's a big performance gap between the Ferrari and the Haas. So I guess you have to take the FIA at their word.
Sorry, Fernando Alonso was just getting on the throttle through the second part of Ravazza. The back end stepped out and he managed to keep it on the straight and narrow, and Alonso goes 8th quickest, 5 seconds away from Sainz. 5.3 seconds for George Russell away from Carlos Sainz. People aren't even in the ballpark at the moment.
They're way outside the ballpark at the moment. It's incredible to look at the split in timings and just how different they are from like the top two, well, even just from Sainz to his closest behind him, Charles Leclerc, is 1.7 seconds. The gap is phenomenal. And it's worth saying Alonso this weekend, he's obviously gone through power units quite a lot. They've got reliability issues, but he has got a new floor. It's just on his car, not on Ocon's. Ocon, if it works, will get it for Miami next time out. But good development from Alpine at the moment.
I think, Jenny, as well, Leclerc might be about to change the ballpark again. He's done fastest first and second sector. He's just coming to the end of his lap now, and he goes 0.8 of a second quicker than Sainz up into first place there.
That's a frightening gap, isn't it? Both of the Ferraris are just, they're light years ahead of everybody else.
That lap, just so he's 8 tenths quicker than Sainz, Jenny, and he's 2.7 seconds quicker than Max Verstappen. So I don't know whether Ferrari have got some...
It's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, unless they're doing...
They must be doing something
fuel,
different, low fuel or something, yeah.
Like, they might be doing a full qualifying low fuel sim, and everybody else is just kind of pounding around on with a lot more fuel in. But they're doing quite a lot of laps, Ferrari.
Well, they could have, say, 20 or 30 kilos less fuel than the other cars.
That's true.
But it makes sense to be doing that now, Jenny, doesn't it? Because there's only 8 minutes to go and it's qualifying next.
Yeah, exactly. They're getting their eye in for the session that could be so crucial for their weekend, and it is how much importance you put on qualifying and setting up the car for quali compared to setting it up for a race condition. You've obviously got the race tomorrow, and then you've got another race on Sunday. So it's definitely, the engineers have been sitting there, they've worked out their strategy for the weekend, and they may be very, very different, as you're saying, because those lap times are very, very different.
8 minutes to go. Here comes Verstappen across the line again, and he does improve to now go 2 seconds back from Charles Leclerc, as he got a bit of a tow over the line from the Williams. He's now went side by side with the Williams into Tamburello and got ahead of Alex Albon. Verstappen actually is flying in the first sector because of that tow. He might be about to set the fastest first sector. Comes now into the Villeneuve chicane, through the left, through the right. There's that big splash of standing water just before you turn right at Villeneuve, and he's only a 10th down on Charles Leclerc in sector 1 now. Got a big tow, admittedly, but he still had all the corners to do also. He's now climbing up the hill, up towards Piratella, through the left-hander, and then starts to drop back down. Double right now at Aqua Minerali, and then we'll get his middle sector split.
Big wake-up issue for the tyre.
Roger.
So that's Hamilton basically saying it's taking a long time for his tyres to come alive, basically. Verstappen is 6 tenths down after the middle sector, Jen.
One of the problems that they've been facing at Mercedes is that these tyres they can't find their sweet spot and the window, and some teams have a bigger window of operation than others, and Ferrari is one of those teams that seems to have a huge window for them to be able to run in all sorts of different conditions and get the best out of their tyres. And that's just not possible for some, and Mercedes and Hamilton, they're really struggling.
6 minutes and 25 seconds to go. Verstappen finishes the lap 1.4 seconds back from Leclerc and Sainz. So interesting that he was okay. Like I say, he got the slipstream, but he was okay in the first sector, but then nothing in sectors 2 and 3. Yuki Tsunoda is the sound you can hear. Down through the gears into the first Ravazza. Little bit of throttle. Third gear on the power now out of Ravazza 2. Sonoda is currently 9th quickest. Comes across the line now and remains in 9th place. Now, I just wonder with the Hasses, are the Ferraris and the Hasses doing the same thing? You know, because they've got such a big advantage over... Ferrari have got such a big advantage over the rest of the field. Haas, not where you would expect them to be. Lando Norris is beached, and that might be the end of the session. Lando Norris is beached, and that is on the exit of Acqua Minerale, but he's kind of facing backwards. He's rolling backwards now. He's not beached. He's going.
And Lando, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Just in a gravel.
Good bit of hill usage there as he just slides the car back towards the track. He'll pick up a bit of gravel. He'll spin it round kind of the wrong way to try and get back onto the track, and he pulls the full lock back on. Impressive stuff from Norris to get that going again. So red flag is still showing.
Yeah, well, the red flag will be out and they'll all return to the pit, so it might not be the end of the session because they'll just wave the green flag basically as soon as everyone is back to the pit lane. A little premature on the red flag throw there, considering it was just a car in a gravel for a few moments. But
because they're listening to you and you said he was beached.
yeah. Well, they must have presumed he was beached. Coming through the first Acqua Minerale, then through the so just loses the back end as he turns into the second part of Acqua Minerale, and then he is in the gravel. Gets back going again. Red flag out. But yeah, Haas and Ferrari, maybe the only two, maybe, I'm just saying theoretically, they're the only two running sort of low fuel qualifying runs at the moment, because that would explain Ferrari's distance to everybody else. It would also explain Haas's pace up the order, and then actually Ferrari to Haas in these conditions, if that were 3 seconds, would that be about right? Yeah, maybe. So that's a potential caveat, I suppose.
Good thing is we've not got long to wait, because we'll find out in qualifying what the true paces are, and qualifying gets underway at 4 o'clock. Remember, it's a sprint weekend. And just once again wanted to highlight George Russell currently in P10. He's 4.8 seconds off the pace, but then Hamilton, another weekend where he's not seemingly being able to hook up the tyres or the pace, whatever it is in the car, because he's down in 17th place and 7 seconds off the pace. So there's a big difference between those, and Russell, for some reason or another, just seems to be able to get into the car and get it performing quicker, which I was not expecting.
Well, Hamilton hasn't improved on an intermediate tyre. He hasn't had a good lap time on an intermediate at the moment. He and Albon in 17th and 19th are the only two drivers whose best lap was set on the full wet tyre. Session is back underway with less than 3 minutes to go. Kevin Magnussen is heading back out on track. I wonder if we'll see...
I think they'll all go, Jack.
Yeah.
They've got to do practice starts. So this is one of the tracks where they form up at the end of the session to do those practice starts. So the green flag has kind of given them the opportunity just to take another cruise out and do that if they so wish. So I think they'll all go out.
2.5 minutes to go. I don't think we might get the odd lap here or there of meaningful running, but it'll depend whether you can get the tyres up to temperature or not as well, because that's going to be an interesting part of qualifying later on as well, is your tyre strategy. We've seen that so many times, haven't we? Do you go out on one tyre and pound round on it, or do you come in for a new set of tyres that maybe have more grip but take a little bit longer to warm up? Austria a few years ago in particular was one example where Ferrari got it very wrong. It's definitely going to be damp for qualifying, isn't it? I don't think there's any sort of doubt that it'll dry up. It's only 11 degrees. Yeah,
I can't see it drying up that quickly. As you say, 11 degrees, it's not really warm enough to burn off, but they have got the F2, which they'll need to send out, so maybe that'll just disperse any more water and create even more of a dry line, because they seem to take up more of the track when they go out. We'll see.
Mick Schumacher coming down the hill in the Haas, 5th quickest at the moment. The Haas is 4th and 5th. Verstappen staying in the pits, Perez in the pits, Alonso in the pits, Tsunoda in the pits, Bottas in the pits, Ocon in the pits, Norris in the pits. So they are all either not heading out yet or will do in a few moments, but they're not going to set a representative lap. We'll see what Mick Schumacher does as he comes down the hill. One of the interesting cars in this queue was George Russell. He's just finished his outlap. Lewis Hamilton is just on an outlap now, so Hamilton won't get another lap in. Russell may do, but it's whether he decides to do it or just use his experience. Vettel is pushing a little. He's 1.5 seconds down on Leclerc in sector 1.
Yeah, Russell's just out on the used intermediates. In fact, most people are. I think Alonso is still in the pit lane, so that's why it's not showing up as a used, but everyone headed out there on a used intermediate.
Vettel coming down the hill now.
Nils Vitic is the race director this weekend, for those of you who are curious. So that's the man in charge of making the decisions, making the calls, and watching on this kind of wet session.
Vettel 3.4 seconds down after the middle sector now, so I don't think he's going to improve on his own lap time as the checkered flag comes out. End of the session, and I can't really see anyone who is on an improvement at the moment. Pierre Gasly is the first driver to take the checker flag, and he just did an outlap. So I think, as you say, Jenny, they've all just gone out for some practice starts. Perez, Alonso, Ocon and Norris are the 4 drivers that haven't gone out at all. So both Alpines and Perez in the Red Bull, joining Lando Norris in the pit lane. Everybody else will be doing those practice starts. Hamilton across the line now to take the checker flag, and yeah, he too didn't improve, so finishes down in 17th place. So at the end of that session, it's Charles Leclerc quickest for Ferrari, Carlos Sainz second, Max Verstappen third, Kevin Magnussen fourth, Mick Schumacher fifth. Perez, Alonso, Vettel, Tsunoda and Russell the top 10. Bottas, Gasly, Ocon, Norris, Ricciardo the top 15. And then Stroll, Hamilton, Zhou, Albon and Latifi, the 20 drivers at the end of this session. Got free qualifying coming up in 2.5 hours' time. It's the championship leader, Charles Leclerc, who is at the top of the times after, as you say, a very wet first practice session. 0.8 of a second quicker than Carlos Sainz, 1.5 seconds clear of his title rival Max Verstappen, but very difficult to read anything into these wet times. Were they running lower fuel? Were they running different strategies? We'll find out more in qualifying in 2.5 hours' time, but Leclerc quickest in practice.
So that is the first practice session done and dusted for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
Valtteri Bottas has had an off on his way back to the pits. He's gone straight on at the second Acqua Minerale. Looks as though he's nudged the barrier, maybe bent the front wing a little bit. Not too much damage to the car.
Okay, Valtteri. Can you get up in the car? Just trying to reverse. Copy.
So he's just trying to find reverse and get going again. He might have just tagged the front wing, but that's all. I think he'll be fine.
He has no luck at this track, does he? Crashed out because of floor he had floor damage in 20, crashed out last time after that collision with Russell, and now crashes out right at the end of free practice 1 when they've got qualifying at 4 o'clock our time. So they're going to have to look at that car and work out what's gone on. But not great for Valtteri Bottas at the moment. As the Tifosi come and have a good look at that car and take some pictures. Of course, Alfa Romeo, another strong Italian brand. So, Jack, that's all we've got time for free practice 1. And next up is qualifying. And as you say, the Ferraris just look like they are miles ahead of anybody else. That can't be true.
I think they're on lower fuel. I think they're on lower fuel. That's the sort of only thing to explain it. Because they're just so far clear of the rest of the pack. And as I say, with the Hasses in there as well, it feels like those two teams ran low fuel and no one else did. It would be my summarization.
Very good, yes.
And but we'll wait and see, obviously, when qualifying gets underway. But we are going in with such an unknown. This is going to be tremendous. I really like this. Basically, no running before qualifying into a damp qualifying. It's going to be great, and it'll really give us the thing is, it'll mix up the grid for a sprint. which we didn't even need it to do. But yeah, I think we're in for a really, really interesting weekend now.
Don't get into the semantics of whether we actually needed sprint racing or not. It's just too messy. I don't know if Bottas has got his car out. Last time I could see he was still trying to get it out, and it was definitely beach with the rear wheels just spinning round and round. Fred Vasseur, the team principal, looking on to see if he can see his stricken driver coming back, but apparently not so much chance at the moment. So, Jack, I know you don't like predictions, but hey, prediction, pole. Bearing in mind we are giving pole to whoever finishes fastest this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be brave to. There's no evidence to say it won't be Leclerc. I think that's the way to phrase it.
Yeah, I think that's
Andrew.
Well, he's been on pole for 2 of the first 3 races. He was nearly on pole for the other one, and he's 0.8 of a second quicker than everyone else this morning. So, yeah, I'll go for Leclerc too.
So he'll clearly be Sainz then.
Yeah,
yeah, he set the 3 fastest laps as well so far this year as well. So boy going fast in Ferrari, Shockara. Come back and join us 4 o'clock. It is qualifying for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. It's now back to Dan Norcross.